to make sound happen on the guitar, we need to get these strings vibrating. And we can do that a number of ways. We can hit the strings, hammer-ons and pull-offs. We can even blow on the strings. But most of the time, we're going to be using our right hand, either with a pick or with our fingers. Finger picking. That's what we're going to be talking about today on Ray Plays Guitar. And I'm going to do it as simply as possible. Let's get into it. Let's start with our thumb. Strumming with the thumb, it just seems natural. It's the way most of us kind of just do it before we know anything about strumming. But that's it. You're just dragging your thumb across the strings. One thing that I really like about using my fingers is that I could feel the strings. So when I'm doing like an alternate bass thing like this, I can kind of feel where those strings are and know that I'm hitting it. When I'm using a pick, I feel like I'm a little further away from the strings. I'm detached, and I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be hitting a string at all. You know what I mean? Because I don't know until I hit it. But with my thumb, I could feel those strings. And for me, you're doing like this alternate bass pattern between the root and the fifth of the chord. Makes it a lot easier, especially when you're throwing a little walk in there. Walk up to F. Walk back down to C. Walk down to G. Walk back up to C. So I can strum down with my thumb, I can strum back up, and it's a nice mellow tone. I'm using the meat of my finger here. Even way back here, it gets a nice mellow tone. Used to using the thumb, we can start by doing what's called a rest stroke, where I'm plucking a string with my thumb and letting it rest on the string right below it. We can also do a rest stroke with our fingers. Where I'm resting my thumb on a string and then taking my index finger and plucking it up until my finger rests on the string above the one that I'm plucking. I can alternate between these two fingers. This is the technique a lot of bass players utilize, as well as classical guitar players. Now what I like to do is use my thumb, but with these other fingers, kind of keeping them all together. I position my hand in a way so my fingers come up underneath like this. And my thumb comes down in front. So I'm kind of doing this kind of a motion, pulling my fingers up while pushing my thumb down. We can of course do that together, and that's a really nice feature of finger picking. We can attack the notes all simultaneously like a piano. And of course we can split up the thumb and the fingers. And that gives us a nice separation between the bass side and the treble side. So I'm keeping all these fingers together, and they kind of fit really nicely in between the strings. Here's a little something that get you used to doing this sort of thing. Doing a bass line, kind of doing a little shuffle thing. And I'm just going to go between, on top of this E, I'm just going to go between an E chord and an A chord. E, E, A, E. So here I switch to an A chord, hitting this open A, and the second, third, and fourth strings with these fingers. Then I went to this chord, this D. It's a D first inversion. We can go back and do the E thing. So I'm basically just keeping these three fingers on these three strings, second, third, and fourth, and just alternating my thumb between whatever bass note I need. If it's E, it's the sixth string. If it's A, it's the fifth string. But that's a technique I use a lot when I'm just screwing around. I'll just kind of keep some bass note going and something like that. I'm just holding down a bass note while doing some chords on top. Here I'm doing an E, going to an A, and I'm throwing in these two notes, a B and a D. Here I'm going hammering on, and then grabbing the first string there. Going to the A, doing a similar thing. Playing these two notes, part of this A chord here, but I'm hammering on in from here into there. Then grabbing these two notes, part of a D chord, D and F sharp. Then going to these two notes, E and G. And then over those two chords, it's just something like that. I kind of veer from this whole idea. I suppose you could do something like that. Let's see. Grabbing the B with my thumb, doing that move, grabbing that note there, but instead of doing that here, grabbing those notes here. So so I can still... There's always a way. Now, let's split up what our fingers are doing. This is something that I really struggled with starting off. I don't recommend doing this, but let me just tell you what I went through. I anchored my hand and I would only use these 3 fingers. This finger was useless. I just couldn't use it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to anchor my hand. But then I actually took some lessons. This guy, David Onderdonk. David is an amazing guitar player and musician based in Chicago, Illinois. I first met him in college, where I had the pleasure of being his teaching assistant for a couple semesters for a music theory class that he taught. In addition to being an amazing guitar player, David could sing 2 notes at the same time. Yeah, I heard him do it. It was pretty freaky. I got another quick David Onderdonk story for you. So fast forward 20 years, I'm working at a local music shop here in Austin, Texas, and I'm taking a little potty break, playing Words with Friends while doing so, and I'm playing David Onderdonk. I finish up my business, I leave the bathroom, and my coworker says, "Hey Ray, do you know an Onderdonk from Chicago?" And I'm like, "David?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, I was just playing him in Words with Friends. That's crazy. So why are you saying his name?" He's like, "He just ordered a power supply from us." I'm like, "That's crazy." So that freaked me out. So then, of course, I messaged David through Words with Friends, and I'm like, "Hey, did you just order a power supply from Austin Guitar House?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's freaky. How do you know that?" I'm like, "Well, I'm here." So that was a freaky bit of coincidence.
Was it coincidence?
So David got me going on actual finger picking. This is one of the first things he gave me to do. So this is a nice little exercise to get your fingers used to operating individually. The chord I'm playing is like an E minor 9. And it looks like this. Playing an F sharp and a, what note is that? An A? What? Is there an A in there? So it's like got an 11 in there, E minor 11. Then we throw a C in the bass. So the picking pattern is this. Our thumb is going to be playing both of these strings, 6th and the 5th, and then these 3 fingers are always playing the next 3 strings, respectively. Here's our pattern. That's it. Then we do the same thing with C in the bass. Go back to E in the bass. Something like that. And then we can do the same thing over an A chord. This chord shape is going to be altered just slightly. And then we just shift our fingers down a string. So now our thumb is on the 5th and the 4th string, and then these 3 fingers have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd string. Dust in the Wind. This is another song I learned early on. This is a good one to practice because it's just the same picking pattern over and over and over again. So it gets you used to... So the picking hand the thumb is going between the 5th and the 4th string. And these two fingers are always on these two strings, the 2nd and the 3rd. Starting with these two, middle finger and the thumb. Then we do that. So the thumb hits the 5th string and then comes to the 4th. That's the pattern. I think of this as we have like 2 outside strings and 2 inside strings. So it's the 2 outside, and then everything's individual. In, out, out, in, out, in, out, in. And then it just kind of rocks back and forth. Now this pattern can be adjusted if we go to like a D minor chord, for example. A D minor only involves the first 4 strings. So just shift everything down and the pattern remains the same. I'm just playing different strings. What if we had a chord like a G chord where we can play all 6 strings? Well, now I kind of do the same thing, but I have more strings to choose from. So that's an example of what I might do over a G chord using this type of picking pattern. The song itself starts on a C chord, then goes to a C major 7, C add 9, back to a C, to an A minor, A sus2, A sus4, A minor, A sus2, C add 2, C, C major 7, C add 9, A minor, A sus2, A sus4, A minor, G over D. I close my eyes only for a moment and the moment's gone. Something like that. Now that little ditty I was playing at the top of this video, I was doing this, the thumb, kind of keeping all these fingers together, but I was also getting a little bit of a spank on these strings. Some of these notes I was actually kind of pulling out. And I got some nails on these fingers, so I'm kind of using that nail to grab that string and pluck it. But I'm also palm muting at the same time. So I'm getting that sort of a sound. So this little ditty starts off with a C sharp, what is this chord? C7, sharp 9. It's the Hendrix chord, just in C. Now I'm pulling all those strings all at once. Thumb's on the 5th string, and then got these 3 fingers on the next 3 strings. And then I'm also doing one of these things. So then I do a little pull on muted strings. And then here, I'm going in between my middle finger and my thumb. And palm muting both of those strings when I'm doing it. What I'm doing there. The next next chord is an F dominant 7. And I'm voicing it like this. Thumbs on the 6th string, still playing the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings with these 2 fingers. Keeping this note E flat as our highest note for some consistency. Now I'm playing C to E flat, coming back up to F. But the second time, going back to here, so we can work our way back to a C. Going to the 5 chord, this is the G7 flat 13. Here's the G7, here's the 13. Actually, there's a 13. We're flatting it. Again, keeping that flat 13 is the E flat here. We're keeping as the highest note for consistency. So here I'm playing the G, flatted 3rd, hammer on to the 3rd, back to the G. Working my way down to this F. Fingerpicking in a nutshell. We can go a lot deeper into every facet of fingerpicking, and we eventually will. But this was kind of an overview and kind of an encouragement for those of you who haven't tried fingerpicking before. Please do. There's a lot of cool things that we can do when we get used to using our fingers. And of course, once we get used to using our fingers, that kind of leads to hybrid picking too. And that opens up a whole nother world as well. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those below. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button, share it with your friends, subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit that notification bell. But most of all, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.